Mr. Horowitz, thank you for your time today and your dedicated work. I'm going to speak fast. 18 U.S.C. Section 793F reads in relevant part, as you know, whoever being entrusted with or having lawful possession or control of any document or writing relating to the national defense through gross negligence permits the same to be removed from its proper place of custody or delivered to anyone in violation of his trust shall be fined under this title or imprisoned for not more than 10 years or both. Isn't it true that Director Comey's initial draft statement, which he shared with FBI senior leadership, criticized Clinton's handling of classified information as, quote, grossly negligent?
That's correct.
And according to your report, Lisa Page is identified as the person who raised concerns about the term gross negligence in that draft statement, and it was later replaced with the phrase, quote, extremely careless. Is that right?
That's correct.
Isn't it true that gross negligence is a legal term with criminal implications, while extremely careless is a subjective term with no criminal implications?
Correct.
I want to pick up on what Chairman Gowdy asked you a few moments ago, and you've said a couple times today the focus in this particular investigation was on actual knowledge. Is that correct?
That's correct.
The problem I have, and the real question here, is that that's not a standard of focus or an interpretation that's provided in the express language of the operative statute. Isn't that right?
That's correct. And when I say this investigation, obviously means the department's mid-year investigation, not our review.
Right. And so the department used this application of the statute. There's no express language in the statute to give them that authority. The question is, where did that come from? By what authority did these investigators unilaterally decide to employ an actual knowledge standard in interpreting the statute?
Well, as we looked at the written evidence, the documents, and then interviewing the prosecutors, they described their rationale for interpreting the statute that way as both a legal consideration because of concerns over whether a prosecution would be upheld if it was successful, and their belief that based on the legislative history of the statute, it required something more than pure gross negligence, and the statute's absence of a definition of gross.
And was there any precedent, specific precedent for them to do that?
They were relying on prior department precedents. In other words, how the department, they believed, interpreted the statute over time.
Let me move on. Of course, everyone in America now knows the sordid history and the infamous text messages between FBI agents Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, including the August 8th, 2016 exchange where Strzok assured Ms. Page that they would, quote, stop the election of Donald Trump. Isn't it reasonable to conclude that criminal charges brought against Mr. Trump's opponent, Hillary Clinton, would hurt her campaign and thus potentially help Donald Trump to be elected?
I think it's probably a given.
Matter of common sense, right? And wouldn't that outcome be the opposite of what Strzok promised his paramour in those text messages that we've all seen now?
I guess so, though frankly I haven't stepped back and thought about, and frankly haven't focused on what the implications of it ultimately could be as it played out. Just sort of as it was problematic.
Well, the American people have, and many Americans would logically conclude that this political bias directly affected specific investigative decisions and judgment calls, but we'll disagree about that. I'm running out of time. I want to get to something that's very personal for you. By all accounts, you're an American patriot. You're an esteemed and trusted public servant, and we would thank you for that service. Let me ask you this personal question. Is the American people's trust in our justice system and the people's faith in our institutions important to you as an individual?
Absolutely.
And do you believe those things are important to our republic as a whole?
Yes.
In your important role at DOJ, do you believe you have a personal duty to help guard the integrity of and maintain the people's faith in our institutions?
Yes.
Let me ask you this very important question then, based on that. If your report had concluded that the evidence showed that improper considerations, including political bias of FBI agents, did directly affect specific investigative decisions, do you think that would have risked eroding the American people's trust in our justice system and the people's faith in our institutions?
It could have had I guess even could have had a greater impact. I think this has an impact, standing alone.
But would you agree that it stands to reason that a man in your position might be tempted to rationalize a report that political bias did not affect the Clinton investigation as somehow serving a greater good of not completely undermining the country's faith in our FBI?
Look, I look at this evidence, and my team looks at this evidence based on our judgments, our best judgments on this. We don't pull our punches because of concerns over how it'll seem or appear. I think anybody who tells me that having just completed an investigation where I called the former FBI director insubordinate and issued a report about the deputy director lying under oath, I don't think anybody can accuse us of pulling our punches on that.
Could you at least see, I'm out of time, could you at least see how reasonable people might reach a different conclusion, though?
As I said in my opening, Congressman, the purpose of laying out this in 500-plus pages is precisely so the American public, who are the people who I serve, we all serve, can make their own judgments. And people will agree or disagree. We've done our best to put our judgment on it. I would just assure everybody, we didn't pull any punches on it.
Appreciate your service. I yield back.
Gentleman from Louisiana yields back. The gentleman from